Hi everyone, and welcome to this guide where we will be installing, or at least configuring, the Fastlight Toolkit, or FLTK version 1.3.5 to be used with Visual Studio Community 2019. This guide is very much based off of Philipp work and his excellent guide, but because I'll be using a newer version of both FLTK and Visual Studio Community, I thought it would be helpful to show some of the steps in video because there have been a number of important changes. So we start off on FLTK.org, and from there we are going to go to the download page. Now there are a number of different types we could download. Philipp used 1.3.4. There's also a development version, 1.4.x, but I am personally going to use 1.3.5. I like to think that many of the steps involved in this video would also apply to 1.4.x, but I'm not entirely sure because I know there are probably a lot of important changes. So for now, though, I'm going to be using 1.3.5. I'm going to download the source.tar.gz. You'll notice that there are essentially 4 different files here, but I believe you only need to download one. At least that's been successful for me. So we're going to download source.tar.gz, and in Firefox it's going to ask me to save that file. And I'm going to save that, and I'm going to open it, open the containing folder. Now you might ask, what is a .gz file? Well, it is a compressed file, so I'm going to use 7-zip, a great program, to extract it. And I'm just going to say extract to a certain folder. So I've extracted that, and kind of like the, like Russian doll toys where one doll fits inside another, we have, lo and behold, another compressed file inside that original one. So we are going to also extract that one. So we're going to 7-zip, we're going to extract to this folder, and it is extracting. All right, and so now we have our source folder, and inside that we have FLTK 1.3.5, at least the initial files that we'll need. But we will be making some important changes to this folder. But the next step here, you can probably move this to really just about any part of the computer you want. I like to have it within the documents folder simply because I saw other people doing that. So I'm going to cut and paste it right into my documents folder. And there you have it. I have some older folders that I was playing around with too. Okay, so within this folder, we can close out of Firefox now. So here we have the folder. But before we can plug this right into Visual Studio, we need to make some important changes. So I'm going to create a new folder within FLTK. I'm going to call that build, B-U-I-L-D there. And now that I have that, I'm going to use CMake to build a solution file. The reason I'm using CMake, not only did I get to work when I was having trouble with another method that Philipp used, but because I believe you will need to use CMake for 1.4.x and perhaps later versions. So we are going to be using CMake to build our solution here. So I'm going to open up CMake here. I'm going to use the CMake-GUI, or I think that's pronounced GUI, that app there. So I'm going to open up CMake. CMake is going to ask me where's the source code. All right, so I'm going to go to that same documents folder. Into documents, we have FLTK 1.3.5, and that is the source folder. Now I'm going to browse the build, and we are going to be using, I think it actually already maps the right place, but you go to the folder where you put FLTK, click on FLTK, and then we're going to click on that build folder that we just made. So we're going to do 2 things within CMake. First, we're going to press configure, and for the generator, I will be using Visual Studio 16 2019. I think everything else looks good. We're going to press finish, and now it's going to be configuring that file, which shouldn't take terribly long. Okay, so it's finished configuring. I skipped ahead so you didn't have to just watch it completing that process. And now I'm going to hit generate. And by the way, the reason I'm filming my monitor rather than using something like OBS is just because some of this is processor intensive, and I found that when I was using OBS, the computer couldn't really keep up with everything, so the video would freeze. So that's why I'm kind of using a more old school version of just filming my monitor. But great. So configuring is done and generating is done. And let me show you what that does. Now we have this build folder. And within that build folder, we have a number of different files. You know, this folder was just empty a little while back, but now it's filled with all these nice things. It's filled, for instance, with a solution. folder, a solution file that we'll be opening shortly. Okay, next we are going to open up the .sln file that was just created. So from Documents, we went to FLTK 1.3.5, and then to our build folder. Within that build folder, you will see a file saying named FLTK.sln. So we're going to double-click that, and we're going to open up in Visual Studio Community. I use the light color theme here because I think it'll help my camera focus a little better. I was having some issues with it. So it's going to load those projects. So all we're going to do, a couple things. So first you're going to see debug here, and then you're going to see x64. I'm going to leave those as they are now. That works fine for me. So we're going to right-click on Solution here, and we are going to choose Build Solution. That'll take at least a couple minutes, so I'm actually going to pause the camera until it finishes. Okay, so fortunately enough, we see down here for the build, 86 succeeded, 0 failed, 0 up to date, 2 skipped. Not sure what the 2 are, but I don't think that's an issue. So now what we're going to do is very much the same thing, except we're going to go up here, we're going to select debug, and we're going to switch that to release, to build a release version. So that's changing to release. We'll start on x64, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to right-click on the solution, we're going to do build solution, and we're going to let that one build. Okay, and fortunately enough, we see once again for this build, 86 succeeded, 0 failed, 0 up to date, 2 skipped. So that build was successful. Okay, so now that we've gone into Visual Studio Community and opened up that solution folder, we now have the libraries that we will be using for our Visual Studio Community project. So if we go to Build, double-click on Build, and then we double-click on Library, we'll see 2 folders. One is the debug folder, one's a release folder, and both of them have versions of the libraries. So here we have the debug libraries. There are 7 in total. And in the release folder, we also have 7 libraries, so 14 in total. Okay, now I've opened up FLTK 1.3.5 again. This is a step that I believe is done to correct a slight bug in the program. It might not be a bug, so don't quote me, but at the very least, I found this necessary, at least when I first tried it, to get it to work. So we're going to go to Build. And this may very well only apply for on 1.3.5 like I am right now. Under Build, we're going to FL. We see this one file called ABI-version. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to go back to the main folder, and I'm going to paste that in here so it's with all the other header files. So that way, we're just going to make sure that the program, that Visual Studio Community can find that program. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my FLTK 1.3.5 folder to make a change to one of the header files that I definitely recommend, especially if you will be using especially will be using FLTK within Programming Principles and Practice, 2nd edition by Bjarne. You might want to make it regardless, but I just thought I would demonstrate how to make that change because it's not entirely intuitive. So let me show how to do that. We are going to go into our file named FL here, our folder named FL. First we'll down to the very bottom for a cryptic file named just X. Now, I found that I was having trouble opening this directly within Visual Studio Community. It gave me access denied messages. So rather than do it within Visual Studio Community, there are actually a couple ways you can do it. One would be Visual Studio Code if you have that. Worked for me. But I am going to open it with Notepad, just because if you have Windows, you're going to have Notepad, and you may or may not have Visual Studio Code. We're then going to scroll down to what will be about the 28th line here, and that's going to be right here. We're going to make one change to this file, and I'm going to copy and paste it directly from Philipp's guide. So as he says, we're going to go to line 28. That's right here, so we're in between enumerations.h and ifdef win32. And what we need to paste in is $define win32. And that's it. We are going to save that, and we're going to close out of that. So that change will now apply when we open it up to Visual Studio Community. There are other changes that you will want to make to some files when you are using FLTK within Program Principles and Practice, and Philipp does a great job of walking through all those. I don't think I need to make a video about those, but I just thought I'd highlight that one. If you're having any other trouble opening these header files or other files to change within Visual Studio Community, remember that you can always navigate to your to FLTK, especially to the FL folder, and you should be able to find those files there. You know, and as I said, you could also open that within Visual Studio Code. It's going to look a little nicer, but ultimately it's just the same thing. So I'm going to copy that over here, and yeah, you'd be able to open it up there, and you can see here that define Win32 is added in. All right, now at this point, some guides would advise you to copy some of the FLTK folders directly into your Visual Studio folder. However, it's been pointed out by multiple people that there are some issues with that step, and so based really on Philipp Seidler's guide, I'm going to show you a different way to do it that I think sounds like will be a better option going forward. So we're back in Visual Studio, and we are going to create a new project. Now the following steps, like much of this guide, borrow very closely from Philipp Seidler's guide, and you know, in many cases copy the steps that he did, but there are some very important differences because we're using 2019 Visual Studio Community, not 2017, and because we're using 1.3.5 and not 1.2.4. So we're actually going to start with an empty project, and we're going to click Next. Because Philipp Seidler's guide was so helpful, we're going to name this Thanks Philipp. That will be the name in his honor. Location, you can set that wherever you normally set things, and I'll just have it there. I like to place the solution in the project in the same directory. I don't think that's mandatory. So we're going to create this empty project. All right. So while that's loading, okay. So here we have it open. First things first, we're going to go to Source Files, and we are going to add a new item, which I will name. So it's, of course, a C++ file.cpp. So we'll name it Thanks Philipp.cpp, and we'll add that. Okay. Now we are going to actually copy and paste some test code that is, I believe, copied verbatim from the Appendix D of Programming Principles and Practice by Bjarne, which is a book that I've been using. It's been great so far, and getting to chapter 12, where he starts to talk about graphics, is very much why I'm doing all this to begin with. So I believe this is allowed under fair use, I certainly hope. But we're going to just paste that in, and this is really just a test program to make sure that we have the box working. So again, to best of my knowledge, this is all from Bjarne, and I hope that he's okay with me using this code, and I really hope that this program can help those of you who are going through Programming Principles and Practice 2nd edition to get FLTK to run. So we have that. You see those squiggles. Why are those squiggles there? Because it does not know where to look for the files. But not to fear, we will tell Visual Studio Community exactly where it can find those files. So a couple things. Some of this is simply what I use, and it works for me. There might be some other ways to get this to work, but I like to have everything in 64-bit to avoid some errors. So we're in debug mode. Change that to 64-bit, x64. Next steps. We are going to go to the properties now. We're going to set the configuration here to debug. And I'm going to follow my notes as I go. So we are now going to go down to linker right here. Under linker, we're going to go to input. So we're at properties, linker, input. And from there, we are going to add in some additional dependencies so they can find some additional features. Now, these that I'm going to be copy and pasting in are slightly different from what Philipp used, because in 1.3.5 it looks like they changed some of the file names. So I'm going to see if there's a way to make things a little larger. But this is what we're talking about. In fact, I'm going to see if I can bring over my notes folder. Yeah. So these are the 5 files that we're going to be copying. FLTKD.lib. I'm not going to read them all out, but you can see them there. These are the 5 files that you want to copy. You'll notice these underscores on these two. That's because the 1.3.5 and maybe in 1.4.x as well, those files now have underscores. So that's where we're adding those in. Otherwise, we will get some errors. So that's all in. Make sure you hit apply here. Otherwise, it very well might lose the progress you've saved. So we have those additional dependencies. Next up, Philipp recommends going to System, again with the linker subsystem. It is already checked to console for me, so you do want to read console, so /subsystem:console, but that's all good for me. Okay, now another area where this differs from Philipp's guide is that, well, he would have us select all configurations, but we're going to stay within debug configurations. We are going to go to now VC++ directories, and we're going to go to library directories here, or we're going to hit edit, because we need to tell Visual Studio where it can find the libraries that we're using for the debug folder. So we're going to go to new line here, and our new line, we're going to click on these three dots, and that will let us choose where to find our folder. So our folder is again in your FLTK 1.3.5 folder. The libraries are going to be in build, which is I think different maybe from some past versions. So it's in build. We are going to go to lib. Now, you cannot simply copy over this current folder, the lib folder, because all we have here is debug and release. And Visual Studio does not know where to go from there to find this specific library. So since we're in debug mode, we're going to check the debug library, and we're going to select that. And we are going to hit OK, and we're going to hit apply again. So far, so good. So next, and I believe actually at this point, we can switch to all configurations, because this step will apply for both. We are going to go down to C++, General. We're going to do additional include directories, and we're going to edit those. And now we are going to tell Visual Studio Community exactly where it can find our FLTK folder. So I'm just going to go to Documents, and I'm going to find FLTK -1.3.5, and I select that folder. And this part does apply for both debug and release, so that's why I switched to all configurations here. Okay, and once again we hit apply. And it's applying, and we hit OK. All right. And now, let's see if this is going to work. We'll hit F5 here. Okay. What you see here is this little box saying, hey, I mean hello world. Again, that's from Program Principles and Practice. So that means that, thankfully, we do indeed have the program working correctly in debug mode. So we're going to close out of that and stop debugging there. Great. So far so good. We have debug mode set up. However, what we next need to do is get the release configuration set up. So we're going to go from debug to release, right up there. Next up, we are going to go back into our properties folder. Go to properties. We have to select the release configuration now. We're still on the x64 platform, which is where I like to be. And so we're going to do very much a similar set of steps with a couple changes that I will explain as we go. Okay, first off, we are going to go back to linker, input, and we're going to go back to additional dependencies. Now we cannot simply copy and paste the same dependencies that we used last time because those were debug dependencies. And instead we want the release dependencies. So I'll again show what I'm copy and pasting in. Just going to paste those in. So I just copied in are these 5. You'll notice, as Philipp pointed out, that they do not have D at the end, at least for these 3. And that's because the D stands for debug, and we're not in debug mode, we're in release mode. So we keep those as those are. So we have those 5 added in. And we hit OK, and we hit apply, otherwise I think we would lose our steps there. OK. Next, we're going to go back to VC++ directories, and we are going to go to our library directories, and once again we're going to edit those. Now last time we chose the debug library, but now that we're in release mode, we want to choose the release library. So we're going to go back to our main folder, I'm going to go to build, lib for library, and then release. So that is a different library folder than the one we use for debug. So we're going to hit OK and apply that. Just for fun, let's go down to C++, General, and let's make sure that the additional include directory set. So you can see that in the additional include directories, it does remember that we are looking in FLTK 1.3.5 for those, so we don't need to change that. I will go back to linker input, linker system, and subsystem is still system console, so that looks good. All right, and we've already applied those changes, so we'll hit OK. And now we will press F5 and see what happens. All right, and so thankfully again, we see that same box, hey, I'm in hello world, and that indicates that we have this set up to run FLTK. So I'm going to save everything. And that is where this guide will end. Now, if you are using programming principles and practice using C++ with Bjarne Stroustrup, this handy little book that I have here, sorry, the lighting's not great, you are not done yet. However, from this point onward, I would say that everything in the Bumpy Road to Code guide that I'm going to highlight here is going to set you up with that. So this guide is very much what I've based this video on, with some important changes to reflect these updates. So, I would just, keep on going down. It looks like a lot of steps, but Philipp does a great job of walking you through. And again, I'm very, very indebted to his work. The fact that he spent 2 weeks getting all this set up was what allowed me to get all this set up in maybe less than an hour. Although when I first did it, it took me about 6 hours because there were some challenges. Maybe a little less, but still a lot of time. So yeah, he's going to walk you through what you need to do next if you are using Principles Programming Practice. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to post in the comments, but I'm very much a novice at all this, so I essentially did what I was told, and I found some ways to adapt to the newer version. But I hope this is helpful, and best of luck in your studies of programming, and have a great day. God bless. Bye-bye.